afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Our next speaker is Hardik Parekh, who's presenting on the OWASP SAMM, Software Assurance Maturity Model. Hardik is a recognized thought leader and executive in the security and privacy domain with contributions to SANS. He's had more than 16 years of security leadership experience with a track record of developing and maturing security programs in consumer and enterprise companies. Hardik has built security programs in dynamic, fast-paced environments while leading highly technical, globally distributed security teams focused on application security, hardware security, security operations, threat and vulnerability management, security architecture, and tools development. Hardik was invited to speak at Global AppSec Conference in 2019 and also serves on the advisory board of several security startups and CompTIA. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Hardik Parekh.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank BSides Tampa for inviting me for coming here and presenting on this topic, which is near and dear to my heart, which is OWASP SAMM, Software Assurance Maturity Model. I'm super excited to be here, and one of the key reason about my excitement is I'm originally from Florida, and I always look for the opportunities to come back to Florida. I was a student about 21 years back in a small university town nearby called Gainesville, and I have a lot of fond memories coming to Florida here in Tampa, Clearwater Beach, etc. Before we start the talk, how's everybody hearing? Is it okay? Cool. Thank you. So let's take a look at a quick professional journey line. I started my engineering studies back in India and started working as a developer back in 90s. After that, I came to US to do a master's in computer science, and that is where I got introduced to the security concepts. Most of the time where I spent in Florida was studying computer science, I got excited about cryptography, which led me towards creating basically or forming an opinion that if I want to work in software, probably security is one of the fields I would like to focus. However, around 2005 is when I got opportunity to work professionally into the security space when I was at Dell. And Dell was facing a lot of security challenges. So I volunteered for testing for security AppSec challenges that Dell was facing, which led me towards building a program and bootstrap a software assurance program at EMC. And after spending about 6.5 years, I went to work for Intuit, Amazon, and Splunk. Past couple of years, I'm also involved in startup by advising some of the security and privacy startups in this space. And I also advise one of the security certification trade organization called CompTIA. Before we go into the details, I wanted to have this quick legal disclaimer out of the way. I'm not here to represent any of my current or previous employers, and all the views presented here are my own and not that of my current or any of my previous employers. Now, with quick show of hands, how many of you are familiar with SAMM? Thank you. And how many have already used 1.5 or any of the versions before 1.5? Thank you. So this will help me determine where do I spend more time during my talk. So thank you very much for that. The quick agenda. First, I'll introduce SAMM to the folks who are not familiar with SAMM. And we'll talk about the who, the what, the why, and basically the history of this whole project over the last 11 years. And after that, I'll focus mainly on some of the key highlights of changes we introduced in SAMM version 2.0 or 1.5. Once we cover that, I would like to spend some time on how do you actually apply this model to your organization. And then at the end, I'll leave some time for questions. If you are in any of these target roles, this is our target audience. But essentially, if you are involved in building or maintaining or operating software and infrastructure, then this talk is relevant to you. As well as if you are involved in any shape or form for security of the software, then this talk is relevant to you. Now, who is SAMM? SAMM is, particularly 2.0 version, is hard work of about 14 contributors across the globe over the past 3 years. Now, one good thing I like about this team is it's a truly geographically distributed team, and it was not by design. It happened to be there. A lot of contributors and volunteers joined this project over the period of time, and it really helps us remove some of the unconscious biases that we might have in terms of either geography or in terms of the culture, things like that. The other important thing I wanted to point out here is the contributors. They also represent small, medium, and large corporations, as well as there is at least one professor, and there are at least 3 individuals who run their own consultancy. So it has very diverse view from all different types of organizations. And it was very helpful for us while we are having various debates while coming up with the new model, because we wanted to make sure that we do not leave any room for any biases. And this team helped ensure that. Now, what is SAMM? SAMM is one of the flagship projects. And for those of you who might not be familiar with all the OWASP structure, OWASP has about a couple of hundred projects, out of which there's about 15 or 16 projects which have been given a flagship status. And those are the projects which have strategic value to both OWASP as well as to the security AppSec in general. And OWASP SAMM is one of those projects. It is an open framework for software assurance which provides effective and measurable way for all different types of organizations to analyze and improve the software security posture that is specific to that particular organization, and it is specific to the risks that particular organization is facing. And there are many resources that SAMM provides. Number one, it provides a way for evaluating organizations' current security practices. Number two, it provides building a way for building a software assurance program in well-defined iterations by creating roadmaps. And third, it is also providing a way of providing or at least providing visibility to the management in terms of the maturity of your program over the period of time by providing scorecards. And last but not least, it helps standardize some of the security activities that a large organization needs to be performing. Because many times we have come across a situation where different parts of the organization, they might have different view of what needs to be done at what maturity level. And this model helps standardize that, and it avoids that conversation and confusion within the organization. Now, why do we need a model like SAMM? So this is a quick look at the complexities involved in this particular today's organization. As you can see, there's many different types of complexity. Number one is technology stack. Some organization might be using Java, JavaScript, Python, Perl, Ruby, Go. So it kind of like per technology stack, it's a different type of challenges that their organization might be facing. On top of that, there is also organizational structural challenges as well. And third one is more about the deployment model. Is it on-prem software? Is it cloud-based software? Is it mobile-first software? So is it multi-platform software? How it is deployed? Is it Docker ready? It is using Kubernetes for deployment? All of these things adding a layer of complexity. On top of that, last 5 years has also seen tremendous growth in the open source components being used while developing the software. And it also adds another layer of complexity. One of the other additional factor adding the complexity is also the last few years we have seen tremendous growth of Agile and DevOps model. And it also adds complexity because in Agile and DevOps, there is a lot more focus on the speed of delivery. And as you can see in this triangle, which is constantly at tension between quality, cost, and speed of delivery. And most of the time in this tension, quality loses, which results into security vulnerabilities. If you look at any of the latest breaches, major breaches like Equifax or recently Capital One, they are mostly related to the application security. So past 15 years, we have seen this tremendous change from perimeter-based security to, perimeter-based security vulnerabilities to more of application-specific vulnerabilities. And as a result of all this complexity, we need a model which helps standardize or at least abstract out some of this complexity and standardize the software assurance maturity levels. I also like this quote from one of the great statistical minds of 20th century, George Box. As per George Box, the most that can be expected from any model is that it can supply a useful approximation to the reality. And most of the models are wrong. Some models are useful. And SAMM wants to be that model. SAMM is that model which is close enough to the reality. There cannot be any model which is very specifically exactly matching your organization. And that's the reason SAMM understands that and recognizes that and builds in that level of abstraction so that it can be close enough to reality and it is still a useful model. SAMM is also measurable, by which it determines maturity levels across different business practices. It is actionable. It provides clear-cut pathway for improving the maturity of your software security. And it is versatile. And this is where I would like to spend a little more time. So this is where in the earlier slide we mentioned about the all different technology and organizational and all the process related complexities. SAMM is versatile enough so that it can abstract out all the complexity and it can still provide useful approximation to the reality of your organization. So it is useful in no matter what type of organization you are in. One of the biggest benefits of SAMM is also it is vendor neutral. So anyone can join this project and they can contribute their thought leaderships and ideas to this project. It is not dictated by any one particular company or organization. Now let's look at some of the core principles of SAMM. One of the first one is organization's maturity and the behavior changes slowly over time. Changes must be iterative while working towards long-term goals. This is where I would like to take back a journey to my experience bootstrapping EMC's product security program, where what I thought initially is like, hey, I will be done in like a year, and here they are, like I left EMC, but they're still working on the iterations after the iterations. The key thing over there is it still provides that level of maturity, and it kind of keeps on moving the needle every quarter, every year. The second principle is there is no single recipe that works for all the organizations. And the reason for that is each organization has different business drivers and different risks that they face. And your solution must be risk-based. That's the reason there is no single recipe which works for all the organizations. Now, I myself work for two different types of organizations in my career: enterprise software companies and consumer-based software companies. And I could see clearly the distinction between the two, where the business drivers and the risk profile was very different in enterprise versus consumer-focusing companies. The third principle is guidance related to security activities must be prescriptive. So it can make sense to anyone who is not very close enough to security. You don't need to be a security expert to use this model or even understand this model. And last but not least, overall this model must be simple, well-defined, and measurable. I would like to stress the word simple. There are many times we had discussions during version 2.0 where when we wanted to design our next iteration of the maturity model or the measurement model, we thought about adding weightage to different security activities, and it quickly became very complicated. And one of the key things was it also almost doubled the time it would take to do the assessment, SAMM assessment. As a result, we went back to the drawing board and we say, hey, what are our core principles? And we say, oh, okay, one of the core principles is simplicity. So we wanted to keep that simplicity in mind. As a result, we removed that weightage criteria as one of the aspects for the new measurement model. Now a little bit history about this project. This project started as Open SAMM initiative led by one of the independent software security consultant named Pravesh Chandra back in 2009. And the first version was made available by the donation from 45 Software. However, after that, for almost 6 years, there was not much new version or improvement to this model, and it became stagnant. So a group of people at OWASP came together and decided to breathe some life to this project. As a result, they came up with version 1.1 by forking, creating a fork out of this Open SAMM project. And version 1.1 did not drastically change the model. However, at the same time, what version 1.1 did is expanded this model to provide more resources and guidance so that more people can adopt SAMM. Some of the examples of the guidance and resources that they provided in 1.1 was around how to guide, quick start guide, the core model, and last but not least, toolbox, which is the most useful of all the different resources, which helps provide data collection for doing your assessment, SAMM assessment, and also provides a way for coming up with the matrix and graphs and charts related to the other activities in SAMM. Now, I joined right after that, and at the point, we decided, there are several challenges we wanted to tackle. However, we focused on the measurement model challenge, which was pretty much binary yes and no by that time. So any security activity, it asks you the question, are you performing this security activity? And the answers were either yes or no. And as we all live in the real world, there is no binary answer most of the time. So as a result, we added a lot more granularity to the questions and the assessment answers. And that really helped with assessments. After that, we recently launched in January 2020 a new version of SAMM. In this model, what we did was we continue to improve the measurement model. At the same time, we also made some structural changes because over the last decade, the DevOps and Agile became more mainstream than the waterfall back in 2009 when original Open SAMM was created. So we wanted to add a lot more guidance related to that in the model, and we wanted to add some of the prescriptive guidance related to some of the other areas, which I'll cover a little bit later. As a result, SAMM 2.0 is not backward compatible to 1.5 and its predecessors. Now let's look at the different maturity levels. And here I want to stress one important aspect that Rachel also mentioned in today's keynote presentation, where not all the organization need to be at level 3 in all different security practices. In fact, I would argue that it would not be the best use of your limited security resources if you try to accomplish the highest level in all security practices across all the different business practices in this model. What you really need to do is you really need to assess your organization's business driver, your organization's risk profile, and come up with a target maturity model for your organization. That is where it will be the most useful use of this model. Now, let's take a little deeper dive into some of the changes that we made in the measurement model of 1.5. As you can see, there are like 4 different dimensions now, or measurement levels that we have, instead of just 2, yes and no. Why we did that is, if we take a look at one of the example of the assessment question, it will make more sense. So if you answer the question, have you in the education and guidance practice, security practice, if you look at one of the assessment question where it's asking, have you trained everybody involved in software development to the role-specific security training? Now, earlier versions, the answers were yes and no. The challenge and the dilemma over there was, if you answer yes, you are having trouble down the road when you say just train your developers, but you want to train now QA engineers, your project managers, your product managers, and various other roles. You will have tough time justifying a budget, because then your management will look at it like, hey, you already answered yes and you get full credit. Now you're not moving the needle, so you will not get the budget. And if you answer no, then you are not getting the credit for the work you are doing. As a result, we added this two new dimensions, few or some, and at least half. I would also like to point out that in order to get the level 1 maturity, we also made change to many or most, because in today's real world, it's very difficult to do something across all the projects or across the organization. So many or most is specific to your organization's risk and business driver. There's always going to be some legacy software which you're about to retire in 6 months that probably doesn't make sense to invest a whole lot of resources. So that is the reason and rationale behind giving maturity level 1 for meeting many or most of this security practice criteria. Now, I don't want to dwell on this particular slide, but this is a quick look at version 1.5. The one thing I would like to point out here is, at high level, there are 4 business functions which are related to the nuts and bolts of the software development organization. And each business function has 3 security practices. Now, one would ask, what are the motivations behind this new version? Why did you have to make changes and come up with a new version 2.0, which is also not backward compatible? And these are the main reasons. First and foremost is we wanted to align with the recent development methodologies, Agile and DevOps, which is kind of like becoming a mainstream, or it's already became mainstream in last 5 to 10 years. And earlier version did not have that. That's why we wanted to have that alignment. And by adding that, even though the earlier versions were not specific to just waterfall model, the interpretation in the community was such that. So we wanted to make it development methodology agnostic. The second one is more about improving the measurement model again. Now, one would ask, like, we just changed the measurement model in 1.5. What's changing again? So 1.5 definitely addressed some of the challenges related to the granularity level of the measurement model. However, it still did not answer the question how well an organization is performing certain security activity. And that is another thing which we changed by adding a qualitative criteria to the measurement model. The third one is we wanted to avoid orphan and unrelated activities in different maturity models. So I'll give you one example. In SAMM 1.5 version, code signing was somewhere around level 2. And there was no related activity at level 1 or level 3, thus creating as a more like an orphan activity. And there was no consistent theme across various levels. As a security practitioners and SAMM practitioners ourselves, we realized that. And even more funny thing is, the earlier version, there was sometimes easier. There are instances where it was easier to accomplish level 3 activity with relative ease compared to level 1 or level 2. So it really didn't make sense, because as you go higher in your maturity level, the cost of implementation should be higher. So that was another motivation behind changing this model. And last but not least, we also wanted to improve the production process. So SAMM itself was kind of more waterfall-y, the way we are releasing the versions. So we wanted to make it a lot more automated. That is what we are trying to do, so that we can come up with more frequent and smaller releases of SAMM. Now this is version 2.0, and I would like to spend a little more time on this particular slide. So at high level, it still has SAMM is a 3-level maturity model. At highest level, there are business functions, and we introduced 5th business function, and this is for the reason we mentioned earlier, that the SAMM version 1.5 and earlier did not have anything related to any guidance related to either build or deployment, which is kind of critical part of today's modern organization, which is living and breathing in continuous integration, continuous deployment model. That is the reason we added this 5th business function called implementation. We also make, just to rename one of the business functions from construction to design to make it more suitable to software development organizations. Underneath each business function, we still have 3 security practices. And what we change in addition to that is, in order to provide that linkage between different maturity levels of security practices, we created security streams, which I will cover a little bit later. Now, if you look at the governance business function, it is looking at more critical aspects and strategic aspects of your program itself and the various methodologies that you are using, like strategy and metrics, policy and compliance, education guidance, which is more or less applicable throughout the whole model. While design, implementation, verification, and operations is more related to the software development methodology that your organization might be following. Now look at design business function. Under design business function, there is a threat assessment, security requirements, and security architecture. So threat assessment is again where we made some changes, where one would have to look at your organization's risk profile and come up with a threat modeling. So that is another change that we made as part of design. And security requirements and architecture is kind of still similar to the earlier versions. As I mentioned earlier, implementation has now secure build and secure deployment, which is the main focus. And the defect management was there, but it was considered as issue management. It was in some different business functions. So we kind of consolidated everything related to the defects that your organizations are finding in the various phases of software development lifecycle. Now, 4th one is verification, which is taking care of the security testing and verification and design review aspects of your software development lifecycle. And last but not least is the operations. In operations, mainly incident management and environment management are the key changes, where incident management provides guidance related to how to detect and respond to an incident. At the same time, environment management is more about how do you create that baseline by providing hardening guides, and on top of that, how do you update your software in the operational environment by patching and upgrading. Now, let's take a closer look at security practices. Each security practice has now something called streams. There are 2 streams in each security practice, stream A and stream B. Now, the rationale behind this is we wanted to create that linkage between different security practices and activities between different models. That's the reason we created these 2 different links. And it is also providing consistent theme across security activities at various levels. Let's take a closer look at requirements-driven testing. So as you can see, there are 2 main objectives for each stream. So stream A is, their objective is control verification, and stream B's objective is misuse and abuse testing. And as you can see, as you go higher in maturity level, the cost of implementation for this particular security activities is becoming also higher. So this is where we fix those structural changes or structural elements of this model, where in the SAMM's predecessor versions, 2.0's predecessor versions, it was lacking, where we did not have that consistent theme across various security activities across different levels, and the cost of implementation was not higher as you go down the maturity levels. This is a quick summary of changes we made in SAMM version 2.0. I covered most of the changes. I would like to focus on the last bullet here on quality criteria. So, and this is where, again, going back to the maturity and measurement model changes. So for measurement model, we had a lot of debates among the contributors and practitioners. And one of the key things that we came up with is, in order to assess how well an organization is performing certain activity, we added quality criteria. And at the same time, our goal was to not double the time it would take to do the assessment, SAMM assessment. So what we did is we added quality criteria to the questions, to the coverage questions. So, and I will go into a little bit details a little later, where I'll show an example where the quality criteria are now part of the coverage question. So if you're answering one of the or some of the quality criteria are not meeting, you will simply get 0 coverage. Now let's take a look at how do you apply this model in your organization. This is a very typical approach where you go through these phases and cycle of preparation, doing the assessment, setting the target, creating a plan, implementation, and rollout. And again, back to assessment and creating a plan and implementation and rollouts, thus creating this more of a cyclic process. The most important portion over here is preparation. As Rachel mentioned earlier in the keynote speak, that one of the most important aspect of initiating the security program is getting the buy-in from the key stakeholders. So this is exactly what you do during the preparation phase. Once you are starting SAMM implementation, first thing and foremost thing what you need to do is identify the scope. Is the scope of your SAMM assessment and implementation is across the whole organization, or it is going to be across one BU or multiple BU within the organization, or it is just limited to 1 or 2 projects and applications within under some business unit. So defining the scope is the most critical, because once you define the scope, it will help you identify your key stakeholders. It takes very different level of buy-in to do SAMM at the organization level versus at the business unit level versus at the project level. So once you determine your scope, you identify your key stakeholders, and then you start to get buy-in from them for rolling out SAMM. And one of the other important aspects here is you need to show them the benefits that you will be reaping as a result of going through this SAMM. Now, this particular aspect of SAMM is the most important aspect, conducting assessments. This phase I consider as more like a Trojan horse. Once you have somebody, either your business unit or your project team or the whole organization, once they start doing the assessment, it will give them a scorecard, which once you get the scorecard, it kind of creates more of a healthy competition among different business units, different project teams within your organization. And that healthy competition is very helpful in driving the improvements that you want to drive in your software assurance maturity model. So this is one of the most important aspect of SAMM, is conducting assessment. Now, how do you conduct assessment is basically conducting interviews with some of the key stakeholders that you identify. And I would not recommend that you just send your assessment questions over the email or over the Slack. I would recommend rather you take an approach where you collaborate with that team and you work with that team to understand the security practices that they're performing, which is very helpful in kind of coming up with assessment model or assessment level for that particular business unit or organization or that particular project team. Now, there are two, in fact, three ways of performing the assessments. One is a lightweight assessment, and the second one is more detailed assessment. So what is the difference? The lightweight is mainly about you just have the interview, you trust the person you are interviewing, and you assign the assessment level accordingly. So that is where you don't ask for proofs or evidence of whether you are doing certain activity, security activity or not. While detailed assessment is the assessment where for each and every claim that they are making of performing certain activity, you ask for evidence and you review the evidence, you collect the evidence, you review the evidence, and based on that you come up with the assessment and the maturity levels for that particular project. What I have found most useful is a hybrid approach between the two, where if you are part of the organization, you already know if, for example, if somebody says, hey, I'm doing static code analysis when you don't even provide licenses, then you know that somewhere it is not true, and vice versa as well, right? So this is where you take the hybrid approach where you only ask for evidence when you are in doubt, or if they are in doubt, because they might be performing activity at certain maturity level, but they might not be able to determine by themselves what should be the answer for the assessment question. And that is where you ask for evidence and look at it, review it, and again set up a time for them and discuss. The most important thing over here is to explain them a rationale. They need to buy in. They need to understand why you gave what score you gave, and that will help them come up with a plan for improving the maturity. So this is a quick example of how do you calculate the maturity score. As you can see, there are two streams here for a security activity, and basically what you do is for each level, you take the average between stream A and stream B activity and add it to the next level average. That's how you calculate this maturity score in the new model. The next phase is basically setting this target. This is where you need to define the target as per the key business drivers and the risks your organization is facing. Please do not copy other organizations. And this is where I have seen many of the folks are making this mistake. They say, hey, the organization X is doing this, so I need to start doing that as well. Please do not do that, because their business drivers and risk might be very different from yours. That's why set the target as per your organization's business drivers and risk profile, unique to you. And estimate the cost, because doing all this SAMM related activities will cost your organization overall 5 to 10% higher cost. Of course, it's not free. So estimate that cost. That will help you create more reasonable plan. And that leads to the next phase, which is defining a plan. You work with your team and identify the next release or next changes, whether it's a patch release, minor release, major release, whatever it could be, and create a plan which is conducive to the development team's next releases. SAMM also provides some of the tools where it will help you create that roadmap. And the roadmap needs to be created in various phases. We recommend it should be in around 4 or max 5 phases. Don't roll it out in like more than 5 phases, and also don't roll it out in less than 3 phases. Once you and each phase also should be somewhere between 3 to 12 months long. So this way you are creating basically 3 to 5 years roadmap for your organization's security maturity. Here, one of the most important point I wanted to drive home is start with the high impact activities. I would recommend training, awareness, and threat assessment. These are the two set of activities which are most impactful for any organization. So you should, I would recommend you to start with most of the high impact activities in the earlier phases, and you can build upon the momentum. Once you have plan, you start implementation. The implementation, there is a guide that we provide to help you with the implementation. In addition to that, OWASP also provides a lot of different projects. There are about 200 projects in OWASP. And we provide this kind of like, OWASP is more of like aspiring to become more of like an umbrella of other OWASP projects. So if you can see, I did quick mapping between some of this is just an example projects. There are many more other good projects under OWASP umbrella. What I would recommend is look at all the OWASP project and see which one that you would like to implement or use during your implementation. And any of this project would map it back to at least one or more security activities and a business function at high level. So this is the mapping that I came up with, but there is a lot of other help in OWASP. So I would recommend you to go and visit OWASP webpage, where you will find all different projects. SAMM also defines this different guidelines per level in the guide that we have, version 2.0 guide that we have. So please take a look at that, and also make sure that you understand all of these things before you start the implementation. The last phase is more of a rollout, where what you're doing is you're continuously creating gap analysis and demonstrating and communicating the improvements that you have made in the earlier version. So this is where it's more of a cyclic approach, where you identify the improvements that you made in this particular one cycle of improvement, and you communicate. It's very important to communicate the good results that you are producing with these changes through SAMM. So once you have communicate to your management all these improvements, you will get even more buy-in from them for the next iteration of SAMM. So it will create this constant loop or cycle of improvements, and it goes back to one of the key core principles of SAMM, that organization behavior does not change overnight. It takes time to make all these changes. These are some of the other available resources for rolling out SAMM in your organization. If you don't remember anything, at least remember the main website of the SAMM. It's owassamm.org. Please make sure it's not OpenSAMM, it's owassamm.org. This is where all the other resources are available. I would also like to point out to folks who are using 1.5 version that there is also a mapping between version 1.5 and 2.0 available. So please take a look at that as well. Even though SAMM 2.0 is not backward compatible, at least you will understand, if you already have performed 1.5 assessment, where some of the security activities might have moved during 2.0. One more thing, SAMM benchmarking initiative. What is it? So it is now time to ask the question, how do I compare with other organizations? And this is where we are rolling out this initiative to start collecting data from different vendors, different independent organizations doing third-party assessment, as well as some of the other organizations doing the assessment themselves. This will help us answer the question, how does my organization compare with the other organizations? And one of the key things is also there will be an option to send anonymized data, so that if you don't want to associate your name or your company's name, there will be an option to send the anonymized data as well. Future direction, we would like to have more faster iterative versions of SAMMs in the future, like 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, etc. The references to other OWASP projects, so SAMM being that umbrella project, and there's aspiration to come up with online assessment and roadmaps. So all in all, my call for action is, if you haven't tried SAMM yet, please try it. As somebody said, proof of the pudding is it in eating the pudding. So please try SAMM. And if you have any feedback or question, SAMM is more of an open forum. So you can always provide us a feedback. And you can also be part of the SAMM project. With that, I would like to thank BSides Tampa, organizers, volunteers, attendees, and sponsors. And if you have any question, I'm happy to take questions here, or also I'll be available right outside the room if you have any questions, follow-up questions.
I'm sorry, we don't have time for questions today, but thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.